searches for extrasolar planets. There was a discussion in National Geographic magazine about super Earths, which are rocky planets orbiting various stars. I think the last one they found is about 2.5 times the size of Earth, and they believe it is covered in oceans, although it's somewhat warmer than Earth would be. But here's a planet where life certainly could generate. So we're beginning to understand all of that, and we're much more sophisticated. So there wouldn't be the sort of negative reaction you would expect. But the other thing that I'm aware of is that when a technologically superior civilization comes in contact with a technologically inferior civilization, the technologically inferior civilization ceases to exist. Not necessarily through conquest, not necessarily through war, but simply the introduction of that technology radically alters the society. And we can look at the various areas of Earth where that has happened. Where,
yes.
One of the best examples is the Spanish introduction of the horse to the New World and changed the way the Plains Indians lived. The horse became extremely important to their culture and changed their culture radically. So that might be why it persists, because if they begin to talk about this, it may alter our society in some way they can't predict, and that frightens them. I really have no good answer for that question.
So that's interesting. It's almost like what you described there is a microcosm version of what we might be looking at if we think about this in the terms of our potential neighbors then. And with that, having said that, there's some theories out there that even for instance, the transistor and eventually even the microchip then actually have come from back engineering various crafts that have crashed here on Earth. What's your take on that, Kevin?
With this transistor, I think the history of the transistor is pretty well established, so that there's no quantum leap in the technology that you would expect. And in fact, if we trace an awful lot of the technological steps we have taken, we can see there's no sudden quantum leap in our knowledge. There's a very precise evolution of this, which is not to say that could not happen. I think about this in the way of us not being able to understand the science and the technology that was found at Roswell. It would be like taking a DVD player back to Merlin the Magician, and you say to him, duplicate this. Well, to do that, he's got to understand lasers. He's got to understand electricity. He's got to understand magnetism. Some things that are invisible and unknown at the time, and it would have taken literally hundreds of years for the Earth-based technology, his technology, to evolve to the point where he could understand what a DVD player was. Because you take a silver disc and you can translate it to pictures and sound, but how do you get to that point? And I'm thinking that maybe the technology that was picked up at Roswell is that kind of a quantum leap, that we do not have the scientific understanding at this point that we can solve the problems and back engineer this and have this filter into our technology. On the other hand, we can take a look at how has the internet changed society, where you could have a very you could have a society that was very closed, that relied on itself, and now I find I have colleagues throughout the world that I communicate with almost instantaneously through the internet. And so that's really altered our societies and our cultures today, although it's a slow evolution. And that may be another problem. You know, they're worried about these sorts of things changing our society. But I haven't seen any scientific development, any technological development that would suggest a quantum leap, that somebody took something and created something that was so far afield that there is no evolution to that point.
Do you think that could be the case in terms of the Roswell incident, for instance, then, that they are in possession of a craft and certain technology there, but they haven't been able to, if you will, crack the code of the craft yet?
That's the only explanation I can think. Although we do see some composites, and our radar, radar invisible craft that we are now building may have been suggested by the Roswell craft, but it is those sorts of small things that we've been able to solve, and it may be, what if the society we're dealing with, the alien society, communicates on a mental level as opposed to the way we do through speech, and so that they're not really thinking things, but they're all sort of part of one giant organism, and so all their knowledge is carried basically in all of them at all times, so they have no need to write stuff down. So they have no information retrieval systems because all the information they need is always at their fingertips because of this mental contact they are with everybody. So those sorts of things might give rise to a way of doing things that we would never think of because we have the need to participate in information retrieval. If I want to know something, I can't just think about it and someone else kind of thinks the answer at me. I've got to go search it out, whether it be on the internet or at a library or through books. I have to go search for the answers because we have information retrieval. But I think how society would change if we didn't have to do that sort of thing, and what that might mean to how we all treated one another as opposed to the way we treat each other now.
So what do you think, before again we go into the MJ12 documents here in specifics, Kevin, what do you think we're faced with here in terms of the overarching situation, in terms of our potential neighbors or wherever they come from? Are they extraterrestrial? Is it one race? Is it multiples? Or are they, as you suggested, millions of years maybe even ahead of us technologically speaking? What's your take on all of this?
Well, given the vastness of the galaxy, just given that, it would seem to suggest there's probably only one set of visitors. But if you're an intelligent spacefaring race and you're out there looking, you may have found other intelligences, so that ups the ante. There could be more. I personally think that we're talking about extraterrestrial entities, people, creatures, intelligence on other worlds coming to Earth. There's always the possibility, although I believe it to be very small, that we're dealing with time travelers from Earth's future. There may be interdimensional travel of some kind, because now we're talking about multiverses as opposed to a single universe, but a multiverse. So it may be creatures in another universe have unlocked the secret to the doorways into our universe. So there's all kinds of answers. The most logical to me is extraterrestrial, meaning that we have visitors from another world. I would suspect that world is close to our planet simply because of the vast distances, but they may have found a way of defeating that, and then a trip to our solar system from across the galaxy might be easier than a trip to the nearest star, simply in the same way you might think of a trip from New York City to a smaller town in the United States can become very cumbersome because you have to take all these intermediate stops to get there, where a direct flight from Los Angeles or Copenhagen or Oslo would be much easier because you can fly direct. So it's, I don't really have enough information to make an intelligent guess, other than to say, I limit it because of these things, but those limitations may be inaccurate.
What do you think their interest is in us and in Earth? Is it scientific or is it conquest oriented?
Given the timing, meaning if we go back and use 1947 as the date of the beginning of the modern era, or go back to 1946 as the beginning of the modern era, or look at the Foo Fighters from World War II as the beginning of the modern era, we're looking at a period of time of 60, 70 years. That would suggest that the interest is scientific more than conquest, because they certainly could have initiated the conquest long ago. And in today's world, it might be much more costly for them to invade than it would have been in 1950 because the state of our technology